Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Welcome back to another 1/18th scale model car review of this, the 2005 Williams FW27, rendered in 1/18th scale by Mattel Hot Wheels, as driven by Nick Heidfeld during the 2005 Formula One World Championship. 2005, it marked a series of big changes for Formula One, revised aerodynamic regulations, and big-time revised tire regulations. No tire changes during the Grand Prix for 2005. The same set of tires had to run through 2 qualifying sessions, at least in the beginning part of the year, and then through the entire Grand Prix distance. So, yes, big changes in terms of the technical regulations for Formula One for this year. It also heralded some big changes for Williams. Williams, through the early part of the 2000s decade, they were actually a very powerful team. They had a lot of clout politically, and they were getting good results. They were consistently challenging for race wins and podium finishes, and even being an offshoot favorite for the championship on a couple of occasions, with Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya in that era. Unfortunately, for 2005, the fortunes started to shift for Williams, and they shifted in a negative direction. The FW27, it did not manage to win any races, unlike its immediate predecessors going back to 2001. However, it was still that partnership with BMW for their engine supply. This is the last Williams to run BMW power. It's also the last Williams to race with a V10 engine, as the V10s would go away for the 2006 championship. So, the FW27, it does signify the end of an era. It's the end of the Williams-BMW partnership, and for Williams, it's the end of the V10 era as well. Despite having no race victories, this car did take 1 pole position in the hands of Nick Heidfeld, and it did take 4 total podium finishes. However, no fastest laps, and of course, out of 19 races entered, no victories, and of course, no world championships. But it is an interesting car nonetheless, and as far as I'm concerned with my 1/18th scale collection, it is the second oldest in the Formula One area of the collection, second to my 248 F1 Ferrari from the 2006 championship. So let's take a look at this old survivor from Mattel, mid-2000s Mattel. Sometimes it's a bit of a crapshoot in terms of what you're going to get, but this one definitely has withstood the test of time quite well. Let's take a little bit of a closer look. The Williams FW27. It is the final installment of the now very famous, even somewhat legendary pairing between Williams Grand Prix Engineering and BMW. On the constructor side, Williams, and on the engine side, BMW. BMW's V10 engines were widely regarded as among the most powerful, if not the most powerful engines on the grid during the final years of the V10 era, and of course, this car being from 2005, this is the last V10 powered Williams, and it is the last BMW V10 engine used in Formula One. Interestingly enough, a variant of this engine, although bored and stroked out quite a lot with a much lower rev limit, actually was found in the BMW M5 and M6 cars, the road cars in this era. So yes, some of this technical know-how learned on the racetrack made its way for street use as well, and those are some great sounding engines, by the way, if you are in the market for now a near vintage BMW. Do take a look at the M5 and the M6 if you want some V10 forever power. Regardless of all of that, the FW27, designed and manufactured by Williams Grand Prix Engineering for the sole purpose of competing in the 2005 Formula One season. Leading the design team at Williams were Sam Michael as the team's technical director and chief designer at the time, and Mike Bijois on the aerodynamics side. Chief aerodynamicist was Bijois. The car's immediate predecessor was the twin tusk-nosed Williams FW26 of 2004. Of course, that car ultimately reverted into a more conventional front-end layout later on in the year, which we still see here on FW27, succeeded by the FW28 for the 2006 season, that car powered by Cosworth, as BMW withdrew their technical and powertrain support to Williams in the favor of starting their own team, taking over the Sauber team. Technical specifications on the FW27, well, mid-2000s Formula One, so carbon fiber everywhere as you would come to expect, including the monocoque structure incorporating the cockpit, the fuel cell, engine mounts, front suspension mounts, nose cone mounts, and everything else like that. Suspension front and rear, a double wishbone pushrod arrangement, actuating torsion bars and bell crank dampers in the chassis there on the front end and attached to the gearbox casing on the rear end. The engine in this car was the BMW P84-5 3-liter V10, normally aspirated, 90-degree bank angle on that V10 engine as well, which was not quite a universal thing in this era. Renault running a 72-degree bank angle V10 in the R25, so we did still see some variation in engine design, which also led to some variation in engine sound in this era, although I think the V10s universally are heralded as being some of the best sounding race engines of all time. The transmission in this car is a little bit of an interesting question. Officially, it's listed as having a 6-speed, transversely mounted, semi-automatic paddle shift gearbox. Of course, semi-automatic actuation there via paddles on the back of the steering wheel, as all the cars had in this era. But Williams were experimenting between running 6 and 7 ratios in their gearbox in 2005. You can find onboard footage with telemetry of this car, and you will see 7th gear engaged on some of those telemetry shots. So this car did run both a 6 and 7-speed gearbox at different points throughout the season. Fuel provided by Petrobras, as the sponsors on the car will belie. Lubricants provided by Castrol and all of their subsidiary brands there. Michelin tires as well on this Williams. Most of the field did run Michelin in 2005. The last season for Michelin was 2006, and with it ended Formula One's tire war as well. Competition history on the FW27, well, it was not as successful as some of its immediate predecessors. Williams, of course, being able to challenge for Grand Prix victories and even being an offshoot favorite for the title in years gone by. However, 2005 saw Williams' fortunes dip tremendously. No race victories for this car. Out of 19 races entered, no wins, only 4 total podium finishes. It did get 1 pole position, courtesy of Nick Heidfeld at the Nürburgring for the European Grand Prix, but no more than that, no fastest laps, and of course, no world championships scored for this car. The car was driven by Mark Webber, Nick Heidfeld, and Antonio Pizzonia. Pizzonia and Heidfeld sharing the drive in car number 8, as this one is Heidfeld in the cockpit for us here. So, it's not one of the more noteworthy cars in Formula One history. Of course, I remember this car racing, as I'm sure many of you do as well. I always did like the looks of the Williams cars in this era. I was not a fan of the FW26 with the tusk nose, the twin tusk nose there. That was very radical, going with the twin keel design on the front end of that car as well. But of course, Williams later reverting to a more conventional layout later in 2004, and then the car managed to win the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2004, and then for 2005 on FW27, once again returning to more or less a conventional setup there on the front end with regard to the front wing and the nose cone assembly. For the sake of being the model that this car is, this is actually the second oldest Formula One car in my 1/18th scale collection. This one, it was done in early 2006 by Mattel in their Hot Wheels brand. So mid-2000s Mattel, sometimes it leaves a bit of quality to be desired. Sometimes we see big application flaws in the paint, the decals, and sometimes just straight up assembly problems with these cars. Not so much the case with this one, though. The quality of Mattel was very much the luck of the draw when it came to unboxing one of these things. However, I've always been reasonably pleased with this one. I've had this one since 2007, I want to say. The beginning part of 2007 I got this car, so basically it was still brand new at that time. I did get it from new. It was bought at a hobby store, not offline or anything like that. So I have had it for its whole life, and I've got to say it has held up pretty well over the years. It is mostly die-cast metal in terms of the main part of the body, with extensive plastic parts for the engine cover, aerodynamic components on the car as well, all done in plastic. But really, it's held up very nicely. You can see the quality of the paint on this one is actually quite nice, as are all of the decals and things like that. Nothing has really come loose. We don't see too much paint cracking or chipping. There's hardly any paint loss anywhere on this car that wasn't there on the day that it came out of the box many years ago. So really, this one has survived quite nicely despite the length of time it has been in my collection. Taking a look at some of the other details on the car as it spins around before us, you can see that front end treatment that we talked about previously. Just a conventional front wing for this era. You can see a lot of aggressive styling and shaping of that front wing, trying to exploit that loophole in the regulations that allowed for the spoon profile wings, but nicely rendered there by Mattel. Rear wing and diffuser section going by. Again, looks very nice. Not very uncommon to see completely crooked rear wings on Mattel models from this era, but this one looks okay. It's not exactly laser straight, but it doesn't look too terrible. For example, my 248 F1 rear wing on that one is all askew, and unfortunately it doesn't look all that great. But not too bad, I must say, for Mattel's effort in the mid-2000s with this car. Of course, it does not quite stack up to the level of Mini Champs, and certainly it doesn't even begin to approach the same atmosphere as something like Exodo, but it does do the job, and it does it reasonably well. Stopping the rotation and taking a closer look at the front end now on FW27. There is that front wing that we've been talking about in these mid to late 2000s Formula One cars with that spoon profile, very aggressive spoon profile as you can see on the front end of this car. Again, that was to exploit a loophole in the regulations that mandated a minimum height for the end fences of the wing, but they said nothing about the rest of the wing's profile, particularly in the center section there underneath the nose. So you can see the front wing mounted to the nose on these very long pylons, somewhat reminiscent of what Williams did in 2004 with their twin tusk design, but way more conservative and way more conventional now for FW27, and you can see just how that front wing is mounted. We've got a double main plane wing here, so we have our forward flap lower down and of course more forward on the wing, and then our main downforce generation going on with the upper flap here with that FedEx branding on it. Very nice. Of course, the center section of the wing dipping down very close to the road surface. That's again just trying to get the wing to run more efficiently with the airflow, generate less drag and more downforce. So basically more bang for your buck with less of a drag penalty. Very cool design there. Of course, because Williams were very much heavily supported by BMW in this era, we've got ourselves a little bit of a reminiscence on the twin kidney motif that BMW have on very many of their road cars with the branding on the car there with the graphics and the decal work there. And of course, we do have the BMW logo up there as well. But this car was designed and built by Williams. That's the team based out of Grove in England. So this car is not a BMW, it is a Williams through and through. More Williams traits that we could see on this car. Frank Williams, of course, being the self-made entrepreneur that he was, starting this team from a shed in England in the late 60s, well, you could see that he sold sponsorship space on his suspension arms. He was the only team for a very long time to do something like that. Double wishbone pushrod suspension on FW27, as was the norm in Formula One, basically all the way up to the start of the 2010s decade. However, we've got Michelin branding there on the suspension arms, and of course that's something that we saw Williams doing for many years, selling sponsor space wherever it would fit on the car. Wishbones there for the front suspension, and then the push rods coming in to the top of the chassis there for the dampers mounted inboard. A little bit of deflection there on the suspension if we put a little bit of load into the front end. Very nice. Of course, groove tires in this era as well, and very hard tires for 2005 because they couldn't be changed during the course of the Grand Prix. We have got our four-grooved Michelin's front and rear on FW27. Mattel, they did a decent job with their tires in this era. They're not nearly as nice as Mini Champs. They're a little bit too shiny for my liking. Mini Champs, they scuff their tires, make it look like they've been driven on a little bit. Mattel not doing that, and as far as I know, Mattel still don't do that. But there it is, and it does more or less look the part. Let's just say that the tires are brand new and the car has not turned a wheel in anger quite yet. Profile view of FW27. First of all, let's go over to screen right, and there is our front wing, the end fence there with the Allianz branding on it. You can see we've got a little bit of a flow modifier, a little dive plane, if you will, right here above that branding. And then, of course, this is the center section of the wing. That's the spoon profile right there, dipping down as low to the ground as they reasonably can get it. Moving to rears, there is our right front wheel and tire assembly there. OZ Racing wheels there and Michelin tires. Nice decal work on the tire sidewall there. That still looks crisp many years later. And then, of course, inside we have got our wheel nut there, replete with this little blue work there just to tell the pit crews which direction the threads go for the pit stops. And then inside, you can see the OZ decal inside the wheel, and then a brake and the caliper detail there, so your brake disc and the caliper there inside. You can just barely make that out, perhaps. Pulling out a little bit and then panning over to the left, and we can see the midsection treatment there on FW27. Notice what you don't really see on this car. You don't see all that much in terms of barge boards here. Of course, barge boards were very common by this point in Formula One, and in 2003 and 2004. the barge board's design started to become very, very complicated, very technical, and very large. However, we really don't see barge boards on FW27, which is a very interesting design trait. Williams obviously were going for a lower drag concept, thereby not including barge boards, at least here on the launch spec version of the car, more or less. But there it is, just all open and reasonably quiet toward the midsection of the front end, getting toward the cockpit area low down on the car. You can see small barge boards here just inboard of the front suspension, but we don't see the main barge boards that we would typically find in this area of the car. It's all just empty space there. We do have some reasonably aggressive shaping of the floor. We've got this little protrusion coming off the floor to this point here, but we don't see anything else in this area. It's all very quiet. Moving the rears a little bit more toward the side pod. Now things start to get a little bit more active. Here is our inlet for the radiator intake and then the side pod proper. Here is this big chimney, a very large one. This is for exhausting hot air from the radiator there. So this would be shot out, assuming the car's moving forward, be shot out rearwards, interacting with this little turning vane here on this part of the car, and also perhaps interacting a little bit with these little dive planes here, these auxiliary winglets that are just there to smooth out the airflow over the rear tires and try to control the tire wake and control any interference that would be happening with this rear wing there. Rear wing end fence there with the Castrol and Oris sponsorship. Looks very nice, and there's a nice speckled finish almost in that paint to get it shimmering a little bit as I move the light around. So very cool. It looks nice. Rear wheel and tire detail as well with another blue wheel nut. Looks very nice. Engine cover, nice smooth sloping line there. No shark fin or anything like that here. We started to see some proto-shark fins, as they ultimately turned out to be on the cars in 2005, but not the case here on FW27. Back toward the center with the cockpit area, you can see the cockpit sides here much lower than we would see even in 2008 with some bolstered cockpit regulations there, just trying to bolster the lateral protection for the drivers. Mirrors there, you can see, conventionally mounted. A little bit of a windscreen on the front end of the cockpit, top side of the monocoque, some pitot arrays and telemetry aerials there for the telemetry transmission and receive from the pits. Very cool indeed. There is the roll structure replete with the snorkel. And you can even see this little post here just underneath the air intake. This is actually a lift point. The marshals would be able to thread a line through that little eyelet, and then they'd be able to lift the car up to recover it if it needed to be pulled out of a gravel trap or something like that. Hopefully the driver has gotten out of there by that point, because that would be a little bit perilous unless you're Lewis Hamilton at the Nürburgring in 2007. Very nice. Taking a look at the rear zone on FW27, now things start to get a little bit more interesting. Of course, we've got our rear wing here, our main plane up top with the BMW branding on it, a little bit of an auxiliary winglet just forward of the rear wing in this section, beam wing, rear crash structure and rain light, and then of course our diffuser running down low here. The diffusers were knocked down a bit for 2005. You take a look at 2004 cars, the F2004, which we've taken a look at from Ferrari some years ago now. You see a whole lot more sophistication in the diffuser design. They simplified things, they lowered the amount of complexity that you could get in the diffuser for 2005 in an attempt to lower some downforce and bring down cornering speeds in conjunction with the very hard tires for 2005. But you can see that coupled with moving the rear wing forward a little bit relative to 2004, they're having to make some different design choices with the diffuser, but we can still see we have got 1, 2, 3 principal levels of the diffuser and our big central tunnel, and also interestingly, we have got these very strange now triangular sections in the diffuser along the top side. Again, just trying to play with the airflow as much as they possibly could to get any advantage they could think of. Very cool to see all of that. Through the center section there is the big tunnel coming through the diffuser. That looks really cool, like all of that. Very cool. Very cool indeed. Of course, if we move up a little bit, we can see those exhaust outlets. They look pretty menacing. Of course, a big 3-liter V10 in this era needed to dispose of its waste products very quickly and efficiently, and there it was. Gearbox casing in this area as well. Transverse gearbox in this car, so it's a little bit wider than perhaps it would be on some other cars, but still looks the part, still looks very, very nice, I must say. Very cool to see all of this from Williams in this era. Remember, this is the end of the Williams heyday for the most part. They won the Constructors' Championship in 1997, the Drivers' Championship as well, and then, unfortunately, they just began this perpetual slide down to the back of the grid, and we saw what Williams did in 2019, and it just wasn't so great, and still not so great for Williams. I mean, we could well be close to losing Williams at this point. So to look back at a car like this and remember, hey, they used to be really, really good. They used to be at the front of the field. Definitely trying times indeed, but here it was in 2005. Coming in now freehand, taking a closer look at the front end of FW27. There's that front wing that we talked about. Very simple by modern standards, but yes, they were exploiting everything that they could per the 2005 rulebook, and you can just see how aggressively they shaped that spoon profile of the wing. Not really any straight surface on the leading edge of that wing, as you would expect to see. Moving rearward, there is our nose cone. There's the Williams F1 logo on the front section of the nose cone, the BMW twin kidney design, and then the BMW logo there, paying a lot of homage to their engine supplier and probably biggest financial backer in this era as well. Michelin branding on the suspension wishbones, the upper ones at very least. There are the lower wishbones, and then the push rods going into the top of the monocoque there. Some hatch work on the front end of the chassis for accessing the pedal box, no doubt. The antenna aerials with the RBS branding. There's the emergency clutch for the marshals, should the car stop on track. And then the cockpit with Nick Heidfeld in there. Nice graphics on the helmet as well as on the driver's suit with the seat belts there. They're just a sticker, but they are there, and, well, they look the part at very least, but no real fabric or anything on these seat belts. There's the backside of our steering wheel. We can see that we do have some paddles on the back there, so that looks very nice. And, you know, that's a fair effort, actually, by Mattel for the mid-2000s to put paddles on the back of the wheel. Looks cool. Looks very cool. Here's the midsection of the car that we talked about, and you can see just how quiet things are. We don't see barge boards in this area. We do see some barge boards toward the lower section of the front suspension, but we don't see any primary barge boards here. So it's all very quiet, just a big gap in the floor, and you can see that very aggressive shaping of the leading edge of the floor just protruding very far out. Obviously, they are going for low drag as you go along the flank of the car there. Some more shaping of that T-tray to have a little bit more interaction with the floor, but again, no barge boards or anything like that. There are the radiator inlets on FW27. We do have a little bit of an attempt at a radiator matrix inside, which you can see there on both sides, and that does look pretty nice, but nothing too special to write home about, but they did attempt to do radiator detail on the car. There are the wing mirrors on either side of the cockpit, and then the air intake snorkel and the roll bar and the T-wing and the T-cam for the onboard camera mount. Looks very nice indeed. Inside the eyelet there for lifting, you can see Nick Heidfeld's name, so that all looks very nice. Nice little decal work there as well. And then our rear wing there with the HP Invent branding on it. Very cool. Turning vanes and flow modifiers and chimney exits there for the radiators. Just blast some of that hot air out of there. There's our turning vane detail. And then those rear dive planes over the rear tires just to smooth out the tire wake. And then coming down the side pod, nice sculpted side pods. They're pretty low side pods on this car as well. And then there is our exhaust outlet for the right bank on the BMW V10. Rear suspension there and the beam wing on that car. Very cool. You can also see this secondary beam wing. This is actually attached to the front wing end fences there. So it's, I guess you could call this almost a triple wing. Kind of like the Jordan 191 in some regards, but there it is, just a little beam wing there. Also somewhat reminiscent of the wings that the teams ran in 1993, 1994 for the high downforce configuration with that extra main plane there. Looked very cool, and this one looks nice as well. This is also in keeping with what we saw on some other 2005 cars, namely the McLaren and the Ferrari with that auxiliary winglet there. McLaren and Ferrari choosing to run theirs integrated with the engine cover and these little dive planes on the rear end, but Williams taking a slightly different approach, designing that inside the rear wing end fences proper. Very cool to see all that stuff. Taking a look at the rear on FW27, there's our diffuser that we talked about before. Big central tunnel on that diffuser. It looks very nice, and there are these rather odd triangular areas on the diffuser as well. Very nice, and again, just trying to generate some low pressure areas to kind of cut down on drag, and also to try and make the air expand a little bit more as that high pressure flow underneath is trying to be shot out the back of the car. Again, just trying to gain downforce in any way they can, trying to claw back that downforce that the regulations took away from them for 2005. There are the exhaust outlets from the BMW P84 V10. And then our rain light coming down here through the rear crash structure, which does look a whole lot less significant than it does nowadays for sure, but that's what it was. Beam wing on the rear wing, and then our rear suspension, the upper wishbones, and the push rods going into the dampers there on top of the gearbox casing. Very nice. There's our engine cover on this one. Looks very cool. I always did like the BMW Williams livery. The white, blue, and silver looked very good in this era, and I really do wish that we could get a livery like this again in Formula One because it just looks very nice. Looked great on television as well. Great job by Williams and BMW for their marketing package back in these days. There's our cockpit detail. You can see this is actually a decent one. We've got some good steering wheel detail there. Nick Heidfeld in the cockpit, and then those nice blue hand grips there on the steering wheel. It looks nice. We've got some decent decal work on the steering wheel as well. Williams F1 on top with the BMW logo, and you can even see where you would have two digital displays there, LCD displays in there, probably monochrome in all likelihood, but you would get two screens there showing you all kinds of information about the car, and probably a couple different pages there for the configuration of those displays. The steering on this car does work. We'll move the lighting away for the moment, and we'll just grab a wheel and turn it. There we go. You get the point. There it is. Works pretty nicely. It's a little bit grabby in places, but it does work. Taking a look toward the sides of the cockpit there. There we go. There's Nick Heidfeld. Coming in a little bit closer, there it is. BMWWilliamsF1.com was their website. Pretty sure that doesn't direct anything anymore, but there it was. Backside of the steering wheel as well from another angle. Nice, very, very nice indeed. Looks the part. There's Nick Heidfeld in the cockpit. Decent helmet detail, a decent driver's suit detail with the RBS branding there on his sleeves there. Looks very good. Cockpit mirrors, of course, with their reflective tape back there, so they do look like mirrors as you would expect. Can't really resolve any images in them, but there they are, and they're mirrors. So there it is. Top of the monocoque does look very nice as well, complete with your RBS branding and the little pitot tubes and antenna arrays. Very nice. There's your front suspension and the only barge boards on the car, and then that very quiet section coming in toward the flanks of the car and the side pods. Definitely looks good. Very nice one. And again, for mid-2000s Mattel, and for this car being as old as it is in terms of being a model and being as old as it is in the collection, again, it's only the second Formula One model that I ever got. It definitely has survived very nice. I don't really have any areas of damage to show you. Nothing that wasn't on the car when it was new. We do have a little bit of decal loss here, or paint loss, around the shut line between the side pod and the chimney, but that was there at the time it was new. So really, the car hasn't changed very much at all in the whole 12 or so years that I've had this thing. So definitely looks very, very nice. There's our rear end once again. Looks good. Still does look good. The rear wing is a little bit crooked, as you can see here in this shot, but again, that was to be expected in this era from Mattel, and again, it doesn't look all that bad, particularly as you start to pull away here from a distance. Definitely does look good. And the final bit of detail, the underside of FW27, here we go. Here's our front wing, and you can see that basically all of the black sections of bodywork here have that carbon look on it. It's a nice texture pattern, and it does look the part as well. There's your front wing underside with the vortex generators on the outboard end fences there, as well as down the roughly middle section of the wing. Doesn't look all that bad, I've got to say. And then the other side of the wing looking like a mirror image. There are the two little pegs holding the wing onto the nose there through the pylons, so that looks good. There is our front suspension mounted to a single keel, so you can see that protrusion there on the bottom side of the car. Yes, we called that the keel, and you can just see that the lower sides of the suspension mount there too. And then our only barge boards on this car, they're basically just little turning vanes to get the air to turn toward the side pods there for the radiator inlets. Very cool. There's our T-tray, and then the center plank on the car, the legality plank there, that composite board, just for policing the ride heights and scrutineering. And then we have got ourselves this information written on the bottom of the car. Williams name, Williams logo, and the Williams car design are trademarks and or intellectual property rights owned by Williams Grand Prix Engineering Limited, all rights reserved, copyright Williams Grand Prix Engineering Limited 2005. So there you go, there's your authenticity on the car. Over here on the reference plane, there it is, China, made in China, were all the Mattel cars in this era. And then coming down toward the right-hand side of the car, there it is, Williams BMW FW27. So there's the provenance for you. Diffuser detail here, there's your central tunnel, and then the outboard sides of the diffuser. Very cool. Rear suspension, rear axle, and then the rear tire, and then there's the underside of your beam wing there on the rear wing. Very, very nice, I've got to say. And again, those two little protrusions on either side of the floor moving forward, that definitely looks very distinctive, and it's the only car I've ever seen that really has it to that extent with those protrusions from the floor. So it does look interesting. Unfortunately, it wasn't the ideal aerodynamic solution because Williams really were not all that competitive in 2005, but this is what they did, and this is what it looked like from underneath. So there it was, the Williams FW27 rendered in 1/18 scale by Mattel Hot Wheels. This car made its debut on Ferrari Man 601 all the way back in 2009. It's the subject of only the second video ever posted to this channel, and it has survived very well. It doesn't look really any different from how it did in that video, and it doesn't look all that much different from how it did on the day that it came out of the box. So yes, it is a good survivor. It is a little bit of a crapshoot when it comes to mid-2000s Mattel. Sometimes they just have defects straight away from the factory, and other times these cars do develop some aesthetic damage through the years, depending on how temperature changes over the course of their completing solar laps. However, this one has survived very nicely, unlike the BMW F108 that we took a look at previously, that one by Minichamp, so a different manufacturer. However, that car had some paint damage, some cracking, and some decal damage as well, just caused by temperature changes. However, this one not really falling victim to that, despite being stored under basically identical conditions and being of a similar age. So interesting to note all of that. Again, sometimes it is luck of the draw. However, 2005, it was also a change of fortune for Williams. They were coming off of their last truly competitive streak, 2001 through 2004. They were a reasonable shot for race wins and even a long shot championship challenger. However, that sole pole position at the Nürburgring was the only real high point for FW27, courtesy of Nick Heidfeld, basically running as we see it here. Also, for 2006, Williams having to give up their BMW engine supply and technical collaboration because BMW were starting their own factory team. Therefore, Williams went into the V8 years in 2006 with Cosworth power, and then later on they would run Toyota power before playing with Renault engine supplies for a couple of years before eventually settling on Mercedes today. However, this was the end of that competitive streak and the end of that BMW collaboration for Williams, and really this car is, in my opinion, it's the last of what I would consider to be the classic Williams, because this livery and that partnership with BMW really did become iconic and a legend in its own right, and of course it was reasonably successful. Unfortunately, they never managed to win a championship together, but there it is. The cars speak for themselves. They still look good. There are still mods made for sim racing of cars from this era with Williams and BMW, so they have aged very well, and they are certainly very much appreciated, particularly when we talk about the drivers that Williams had in this era. Ralf Schumacher, Juan Pablo Montoya, definitely some of the more well-known names in Formula One history, so again, they are also linked with that Williams-BMW partnership. So there it is. The FW27 had this car for a very long time. I figured it was high time to show it to all of you once again. I do hope that all of you have enjoyed this one, though, and of course, thank you all very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.